pleasant good morning. Welcome to BVI Finance Breakfast Forum. I'm your host for today, Adriana Salvarol. I am the Marketing and Media Coordinator for BVI Finance. Today's presentation will be on building a sustainable Virgin Islands National Sustainable Development Plan. Here's a little background on the plan. The government of the Virgin Islands has been in the process of developing a National Sustainable Development Plan, which started in 2021, led by ECLAC consultant, Dr. June Soomer. The plan will be provide a 15-year vision and roadmap for the territory and will be underpinned by the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The process involved consultations with the public across islands, and we are now addressing key sector consultations to ensure proper representation of main economic pillars. We are grateful for the opportunity to speak to financial services us today and to be a part of this process. So I just want to introduce you all to our lovely presenters today, Dr. Soomer, who has over 30 years of academic and professional experience functioning at the managerial, operational, and technical levels in the diplomatic, financial, and educational sectors. Described as a woman of first, she was the first woman to receive a PhD in history from the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus, first woman to serve as St. Lucian ambassador to CARICOM and the OECS, the first woman to serve as the OECS commissioner, the first woman to serve as the Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States, and the first woman to perform the role as chair of the Open Campus Council of the University of the West Indies since 2018. She has served on many national and regional committees. Her favorite pastime is cricket, which you have to show me a thing, Dr. Soomer, I need to learn. She watches and analyzes it, and she has published the social pillar of integration in CARICOM Perspective 1992 to 1993 issues, Cricket and the Politics of Integration in Liberation Cricket, WI Cricket Culture, and Cricket and the Origins of Federation Organization in the area of conquest, popular democracy, and West Indies cricket supremacy. Her dream job is to one day run the West Indies Cricket Board, which I'm pretty sure you're on your way to. Emery Pemberton is born and raised in the Virgin Islands. He started his career in public service in 2007 through music education. Shortly thereafter, he transitioned to economics, and this was always his interest. He pursued his bachelor's degree in economics at Florida International University and returned back home to rejoin the public service in 2011. He first joined the Development Planning Unit, now Central Statistics Office. His experience also includes being adjunct faculty at the H. Laverty Style Community College between 2011 and 2016, teaching both microeconomics and macroeconomics. In 2015, he transferred to the Ministry of Finance in the macro fiscal unit, where he continues to make his contribution in areas of development, strategy, implementation, and linkages with the budget process. Currently, Mr. Pemberton is part of the team working on the National Sustainable Development Plan, which is centered around the implementation of the SDGs. He continues to hold an interest in the growth of developing countries, especially SIDs in the Caribbean, and looks forward to seeing more growth in the integration of the region. Thank you both again for presenting this morning, and now I will hand it over to our lovely presenters.
Thank you very much. We will start by sharing our presentation with you. Thank you. We have already introduced the team to you. And let me say that it is an honor to present to this sector while working on the central bank, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank many years ago. I recall when we were trying to establish financial services throughout the Caribbean. But I have to say that the Virgin Islands have to be the most successful that we have seen in the region. And we look forward to helping you strengthen your mandates as you deal with development in the Virgin Islands, especially with regard to national sustainable development. By way of introduction, let me say that we want to look at what we have done so far. We do have a draft plan that we should have shared with you, where we look at the vision for the country. We look at the outcomes. We want to put in place an implementation framework as well as an M&E framework. And we'll also look at the way forward for the plan. But before we remove ourselves from this slide, I have to say that we did a comprehensive situation analysis with regard to the financial services sector, and we will share that with you also. By way of background, the Sustainable Development Goals are these goals that are established by the United Nations. There are 17 of these goals. And we have gone through the territory, going to the main islands, trying to have consultations. We had more than 70 sets of consultations, and we also had responses to a survey that we did. It was a very good response. In fact, the responses have been very good. We want to identify some of the challenges that we face. We want to assure you that we are not starting from the beginning, that there were many foundational documents that we looked at when we examined what was happening in the country. So this country has been putting in place a lot of the developmental issues that we will tackle, but we just wanted to identify the gaps and to put together one comprehensive plan, an overarching plan, because that did not exist before in the country, although there had been attempts to do it. We have done a comprehensive situation analysis of all of the various sectors, and we also want to share with you some of the limitations that we had during the process. So the outline of the National Sustainable Development Plan is, as you see it there, we have background and introduction, the context for the vision for sustainable development, the priorities to 2040, looking at the national goals, and moving from goals to national outcomes, because you don't want to just have a goal. We want to say how you're going to do it and what you want from it. We also have an implementation framework within the 4th chapter of the plan, as well as a monitoring and evaluation framework in the 5th chapter. So this is the vision that we have come up with by listening and getting responses to surveys and different areas for the country. Most people wanted spirituality and that issue at the forefront because it's part of your constitution. And we wanted to look at how people would be at the center of this plan. So we wanted to look at the issues of equality, social justice, etc. We wanted to know that this is a plan based on proper governance and also supported by the economic, environmental, and social sustainability of the country. So we looked at the whole issue of the environment, which is very important to this country, as well as the strong support for effective institutions. It's one of the challenges that they saw. And so that is the vision of how people saw overall what they wanted for the country. We also took time off to speak to the young people, recalling that this is a 15-year plan, and we wanted them to say what they wanted as their vision. So there's also a youth vision within the plan where they looked at issues like creativity, opportunity, participation, and it's very much in keeping with the broader vision for the country. But they wanted everybody to know that they did have abilities and they wanted to take advantage of the opportunities, that they were not leaders for the future, that they are leaders now, and that we had to help them to be able to achieve their goals by giving them constructive feedback. They said to us, not many people speak to us. Nobody asks our point of view. And so we tried to put all of these things within the plan to ensure that the young people are satisfied. It is their plan. As I said, they're going to be living it. We had certain priorities that we identified, and these were priorities that are not new, priorities that we saw coming up after the hurricanes, when the country also did an assessment with regard to where it was. And for the country, national identity and cultural integration and heritage seems to always be at the forefront. People want to know who they are, where they came from, why they behave certain ways, why they have certain things that they eat, certain ways they dance, etc., etc. They want to be able to revel in their national identity. They wanted to participate more in the economy. To a large extent, they did not see the opportunity for participation. They wanted more preservation of the environment and the move towards clean energy sources. They want to see more private sector engagement, especially with the public sector. And in that regard, they want to see more public sector efficiencies, moving away from the inefficiencies that exist now. They want more and better public infrastructure, more youth engagement, food security, as well as an emphasis on human resource capacity development and data. Data was at the foundation of everything that we do. People ensured that we realized that they didn't think that policies could be effective without proper data. We came up with 4 national goals where we looked at empowering the people and you notice we tried to put the people in the goals everywhere we went, that they were empowered, that they were living fulfilling lives, that the country was prosperous internationally, that we had a competitive economy, that we had good governance and citizen participation. And they did not want just citizen participation once every 4 years when you have election. They want to be engaged, and they also want environmental sustainability for the islands. When we looked at the financial services, we did a situation analysis, and if you go into the document, you can see that there are about 3 or 4 pages dedicated to the financial services. And we recognized that when we looked at the situation, how it contributed to development in the country, how it was a leading financial center, that it demonstrated that it could contribute to government revenue, that it facilitated the development of regulations that were accepted internationally, that were transparent, etc., that it also gave gave a place for the development of other services within the sector, legal, accounting, etc. And so it has helped to create opportunities for local employment. We also realized that it contributed to being the leading offshore financial center in the world, that it was a leading jurisdiction for the incorporation of companies, and it gave greater clarity to the requirements for economic substance and creating an enabling environment to reap the benefits while also managing potential risks. So you have a lot to be proud of with regard to how you contribute to GDP and to revenue development and to the development of other industries and other sectors in the community. We recognize faced certain challenges, and we looked at that during the situation analysis, how you negotiated internationally with regard to digital tax initiatives, how the understanding of the industry and the impact on the industry of certain international regulations, how you retool, reorganize yourself all the time, and have to ensure that you can manage these complex financial instruments that you deal with, and also how you deal with issues like de-risking of the banking sector, which is a critical issue for us at this time in the region, in the territory, because of the fact that we do not have these overseas international connections. And this is a concern for governments and businesses alike. And how you deal with compliance generally, and how these costs affect you. So now that we thought we had a good assessment with regard to a good situation analysis with regard to the financial services, we looked at the various goals that we have, and we went through each goal to see, and recalling I'm presenting to you not only as a financial sector, but as a citizen of the country, and that you also have a role to play. You can see that in our first national goal. Remember, I had shown you 4 national goals. We have different outcomes, and for the first goal, we have 5 national outcomes, and we align each of them to the SDGs, because one of the things we have to do once we start implementing is to make sure that we monitor the impact on these SDGs so that we can make a report to the United Nations on how we are doing in that regard. And I thought that maybe national outcome number 2, an educated and highly skilled population creating a dynamic 21st century labor market, would be very important to your sector. Very, very important to your sector, but that all of the other issues would be important to you as citizens of the country. And so with regard to one of the things that we did with each national outcome was to align them to the strategies that we are going to be using. We have had, because we have been doing this for the past year, we have had several follow-up meetings with different sectors for them to tell us whether or not the strategies we have recommended for achieving the outcomes are adequate for them. And so some of these might change once we go through the draft again. I'm doing that at this time. But on the whole, these are the strategies that we have proposed in relation to the things people have recommended to us. So for a healthy population of happy families, these are the strategies that we have included. And I thought that maybe for your sector, that strengthening the health systems and becoming more climate resilient, as well as capitalizing on the silver economy. These are people globally who have money to invest in countries. And a lot of countries have strategies for dealing with the silver economy. How people can come to these countries. I mean, look at these countries. They're so beautiful. The standard of living, the health that is, you know, people try to get away from their own countries to come and relax and to have a better lifestyle. And I thought that that would be important to you. We also thought that an educated and highly skilled population was something that you would want to know what's happening. So you'd have an advanced knowledge-based economy to drive competitiveness, to provide educational opportunities for all with a focus on lifelong learning and inclusiveness. I expect that because of the sector that you're in, that your people always have to be retooling, learning things and so on. And both your male and female stakeholders would be involved in this lifelong learning. One of the things that we have to do is to align education and training with the needs of the labor market. We have had conversations with the college on these issues, and to provide world-class training opportunities for all of the various sectors. With regard to leaving no one behind and having responsive social protection systems, while you may not be involved in this directly, I think that you would want to know that we are trying to ensure that there are social protection systems that include legislation, policies, etc., that will ensure that we are tackling poverty from the very beginning. With regard to equality of opportunity and gender equality, we would hope that you do things like partnerships for internships for young men and young women, and that you also invest in a statistical system that will capture data related to men and women in the system. I mean, if you have to give a presentation with regard to equality within your sector, how would you handle that? It's one of the things that more and more people are being asked, companies are being asked to do. So we think that this is very important for sustainable development and for your sector. And I have tried to highlight the ones that are irrelevant to you in red. Our identity and culture. I am sure that you would want to be involved in promoting these things. I know that as part of your corporate responsibility, that you may be involved in culture and so on, but I could not identify a specific area for you. And so I think that you would have to tell me a little more about it and how you think that you can be more involved in ensuring development of culture in the country. For goal number 2, we have 7 national outcomes, and again, we align them to the Sustainable Development Goals. And we think that an enabling business environment, strong and resilient economic infrastructure, science, technology, and innovation, globally competitive industries, and a resilient, sustainable economy that is diversified and supports new economic pillars would be very important to your sector. So here we have under goal outcome number 6, balanced economic growth and development. We want to see better public financial management, and we want to see transformation in that area, as well as we need to assess the fiscal rules that we have in place for us to strengthen them and ensure that they are meeting the standards that we want them to meet. With regard to an enabling business environment that is conducive to investors, entrepreneurs, and workers, we want to see issues relating to investment, innovation, and a more formalized business sector. So we are recommending in regard to your sector that you will look at promoting and enhancing the use of ICT. We look at national, regional, and international initiatives that develop capacity and that would impact the financial services sector. We want to see the enhancement of the environment at both the national and regional level to attract more public and private investment, and also setting national regulations and policy frameworks. You have done that very well, and you have reviewed and you have kept on the ball with regard to that. But we want to see a very proactive approach in that regard. As we look at micro, small, and medium enterprises, we think that we need to be able to bridge the skills gap in the labor market and to streamline and simplify business licensing and regulatory processes. I'm sure that some of you get bogged down in these regulatory processes that hinder the development of business in the country. So I think that it's a good place for you to also place some emphasis and help us to develop. We did not put a specific one for you with regard to sustainable energy and water. You would have to tell me whether or not you think that it relates to you directly, except maybe in the area of investment, that you would want to see investment in these things for us to have more renewable energy in the country, and that we have initiatives with regard to resource planning in the country. As we move to science, technology, and innovation, I think that many of these are important to you. Enhancing strategic public-private partnerships, developing systems innovations for competitiveness and inclusive development, and encouraging public sector innovation. You may not at first see it as very relevant to you, but I think it's very important for us to have that public sector innovation as we move forward with developing the country. As we look at creating globally competitive industries, you already have, the thing about it is that we always look at what we have not done, but you have a system that you can share with the rest of the world. You have best practices that you can share because you have helped to create an enabling environment to support the fintech industry. You have ensured that there is efficiency and competitiveness within your industry. You have focused on business opportunities, and you need to be able to document these things for people to see what you have achieved. People always think that because we are small, that we don't have something to offer the rest of the world. But when I looked at the situation analysis for this sector, I can tell you that you have done many things that you need to be able to put out there. And as we go through the implementation of the plan, I would like you to see where the gaps are and what you can do better. And if you need us to come in and look at gaps with you, we can do that so that you can relate them directly to the Sustainable Development Goals and for you to be able to say, this is how we have contributed to the Sustainable Development Goals for the Virgin Islands. Fossil fuels, sustainable economies, diversified new pillars, and so on. I think that in the area of investment and getting investment for the country, that this is one of the areas you may want to focus on. With regard to goal number 3, we think that efficiency and effectiveness of government is very important because it reflects on your sector. Because if they look at government, they look at you, and you can be sure that more scrutiny will be coming towards you because people will expect you to be more accountable, and let us not think that one sector is divorced from another. And so we see reform and modernization of laws, especially in enforcement of infrastructure, as well as improving the national capacity for evidence-based policy making will be very important to you. So if you can think of ways in which we can help you to do that, for you to make sure that your sector is safe and secure, let us help you. So we have already said that accessibility of data and statistical systems will be important. How you develop global partnerships will be important. How you work with the people from the Virgin Islands who are outside, because people who come to your sector do not only have to be people from outside of the country that don't belong to the country. So we have one of the things we have realized in doing our consultations, because we have also met with the diaspora in that regard, is that you have a lot of people who are willing to invest, And so the financial services sector would be one of the places that you might want to help your diaspora to understand their role in developing that sector. Constitutional advancement, something that is very important as we move along, as we move the country along, and it's part of the National Sustainable Development Plan, because you want that integrity, that honesty, that mutual respect to be part of the constitutional advancement of the country. I have nothing specific in that regard to the financial services, but you understand your role. With regard to transparency and accountability, well, you know, every day you have to be doing that in your sector. So we want you to continue to promote the rule of law at the national and international levels. And we want also for the issue of illicit financial flows into the country to be a one that you place a lot of emphasis on. I know that you have registries, etc., but you have to always be vigilant. So we ensure that transparency and accountability is part of the plan for the country. Feedback, social dialogue. I did not put anything in relation to to your sector in this area, but I think that one of the things that you may want to do is to have a more public face. You may want to have a more public face. People think of financial services as something that is offshore, but it operates in this jurisdiction and people want to know more. So I would like you to undertake more public engagements so that people understand your work a little more and understand what you are doing for the country. It is part of your image as a business or as businesses in this country. You need also, under the strengthening foreign relations, to focus more on capacity building and ensure the development of your people. Make sure that they have the negotiating skills. Make sure you have the ability to access development financing. Help the country to attract these development financing. That right now, a lot of the emphasis on small island developing states and development financing and climate financing and building resilience would be important to your sector, because building resilience is not only about environmental resilience, but how do you build resilience within your sector? How do you look at issues like risk management, etc., within your sector? So all of that is strengthening, and there are a lot of countries who do this similar things, and a lot of them are small island developing countries, and you want to be able to have that advocacy on your behalf out there, especially with regard to your sector. You want people to be able to advocate on your behalf. National Goal 4. Again, we have, that one deals mainly with the environment, and there aren't really many things related to you specifically, but if you see anything that you think that you can contribute to with regard to the National Sustainable Development Goals, feel free to tell us about it. So we have all the issues relating to the environment in this sector and management of the use of natural resources here. So I'm just giving you an overview in that regard. Also strengthening the legislation. The blue economy is something that we have been trying to develop in these large water economies. And so the country should put more emphasis on the opportunities related to the blue economy, the marine sector, the fishing industry, the environment, etc. Hazard risk reduction and adaptation. We have signed on to many agreements. We need to be able to put in the financing for adaptation. We need to be able to, or at least access it from outside. We need to mainstream climate change in all our national policies. And we just generally need to build a more resilient, environmentally resilient BVI. We have, as I said, an implementation plan within the National Sustainable Development Plan, which focuses on planning, coordination, execution, feedback, and leadership for us to ensure effective implementation. And we have recommended in the plan a framework for doing that. One of the things people always asked us as we did consultations was whether or not we are sure that government would put the plan in place. And so one of the things we had to ensure is that we gave it some kind of legitimacy all the way up to the House of Assembly. And that's what we have done. And we want to ensure that there's feedback and information flows to and from sectors, from policy and national sustainable development planning unit, so that people would see what is being achieved. They can have somewhere to ask a question with regard to the National Sustainable Development Plan, and we can coordinate these things much better. We have developed a whole framework with regard to the National Sustainable Development Planning Unit, and they will be responsible for implementation and review of the National Sustainable Development Plan. Remember that plans are not set in stone. As you have your plans within your sector, you review them every once in a while, and this is a 15-year plan. Things might happen. We might get a windfall, maybe from financial services, or we might get a dip because tourism is down. But at some point, we must stop and look at our deliverables and whether we're achieving them and how we operate with the various stakeholders. And so we have put in a comprehensive implementation framework for that unit. And all of the various things that would go with regard to implementing that framework, including preparing a resource mobilization strategy, a plan for engagement with the diaspora, and also coordinating the report to the United Nations, as I said earlier. I will let Che take you through the monitoring and evaluation framework.
Thank you, Dr. Soomer. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, great. And as you just mentioned, the diaspora, we have already kicked off our diaspora meetings. That was one of the most recent events that we had. So we already started to engage with the diaspora and Virgin Islanders that are away. Right now, I'm going to discuss the M&E framework. We do have a global framework for those of you that have not seen the SDGs, are not familiar or very familiar with the SDGs. We know that it is a global initiative that takes 15 years. And what we've done is basically went through a process of taking these global indicators, looking at how they relate to the world, also how they connect to the Caribbean region, and then also localizing them. So we have the monitoring and evaluation framework, and basically not all of these goals that are global or even around the Caribbean may be relevant to us. So we started a process of localizing these SDGs. We can see that we went from 247 global indicators. We were then introduced to what we call the CARICOM core set of SDGs. The CARICOM countries went through a whole process of identifying which indicators are more relevant to the Caribbean, and then they introduced them to us, and we used that core set as a starting block for our indicators. But not only that, we had conversations and basically refined them. We included some extra ones. Maybe CARICOM left out some indicators that we in the Virgin Islands might have a particular interest. So we have what we call a very unique set of indicators. We could call them the BVI set or the Virgin Islands set. So we have here the progression. We went from global set of indicators. We have the CARICOM set of indicators, which now brings us to the Virgin Islands national set of indicators, which we use at our point for bringing it together for the M&E framework. Where does it meet the budget process? We know that in order to accomplish anything, we need to have a plan and we need to have a budget. So we've also been working on how do we tie and map these SDGs, our interest in as far as government, to the process of executing. So we're now engaging with the private sector. We know that this is a plan for the territory, and it's not just a government plan. And this is something that we want people to understand, that we are showing you how we, as far as government, are tying our goals to the National Sustainable Development Plan. But this is a plan for all persons and all sectors. So we will be showing our strategy and how we tie it to the budget process. The SDGs are highly based on results. We do have our results-based management framework. So we've also recently, a few years ago, went under this process of transforming the budget process to a results-based management framework, which is ideal for monitoring and evaluation. And we can pay attention to developing our statistical frameworks and also quantifying the impacts that we have. And I think that should explain that part. And Dr. Soomer, we're gonna discuss this last slide for next steps, or I can just keep talking?
Yes, we well, when we develop the next steps, we had started to undertake some of these review meetings already. So we have met with the college, we have met with the fisheries sector, we have met with the farmers, we have met with another diaspora group. So we have met with the chamber and so on for us to look. We have gone through this with them already, and they have sent in their reviews. So right now we're in the process of updating the plan and so on. The next step then is for us to present, I am hoping in the next 2 weeks, by the 15th of July, that I can present the PS and the new premier with the final draft. And from there, they would be able to tell us when they're going to take it to the House of Assembly. And if they need any cleanup before we submit the final document. And then we will have a public launch at some point of the plan, as well as the other issues that you see there. We had decided that we were taking the SDGs all the way to preschool. So we have developed a coloring book, and some of the youngsters in the schools developed the theme for us for the National Sustainable Development Plan. So we want to do all of these prize givings and do the public launch at some point very soon. I know there are challenges right now with regard to government and governance, but we are hoping that we'll still go through this process. Thank you. Next slide, Che.
That is it. So
thank you very much.
Thank
you for listening, everyone. We are ready for the questions.
Yes, so I'm going to go ahead and begin. Just want to let all the attendees know that now is the time to put your questions in the Q&A box, and I will go ahead and read them to Dr. Soomer and Mr. Pemberton. So we have two already there. The first one is from an anonymous attendee. Dr. June, thanks for your presentation. How are you expecting to have some investors from the BVI and foreigners with the new Trade Act? The percentage of trade licenses for foreigners are low, and the increase in the fees and the jurisdiction will probably have less investors or more persons having a main business to be a local partner.
Sure, you can unshare the presentation. Okay, let me say that I believe that there is a process going on right now. I am not involved with that. I am doing the National Sustainable Development Plan. I am not involved with the particulars of things like trade acts, etc. But I know from talking to people within the various sectors that there are challenges, especially with regard to trade licenses for people who are not considered belongers. So there are many things that have to be done with regard to refining these processes. I cannot make a pronouncement on it because, as I said, I'm not involved, and this is a direct government issue. I'm a consultant and I don't work directly with these issues, but I believe that every day there are processes that they're trying to refine to ensure that there is a fair deal for both people who are considered foreigners and for local people. So I think it's a balance that all of our countries try to ensure that we have in place. And which is why I'm saying that you must have clearly documented policies and procedures so that things are not done because of who you are, but because you satisfy certain criteria. And that is how we should do business. And one of the things that we have to ensure in the region, and I don't mean just here in this territory, but in the region, is that the ease of doing business is something that we look at critically. We look at it critically. I remember when I was ambassador to CARICOM and OECS in St. Lucia, it was one of the things that St. Lucia touted and was very proud of. We were always on the top, whatever it is, for doing business in the region. And I think that it is something that we should aim for. So I am not too sure what is being done, but I agree that we need investments in the country, but we also need investments from the country in policy development.
There was a follow-up to that where the person asked, the BVI acts in general are not developed for all. For example, if I have a dispute related to a construction, because the contractors are local, I would never win if I'm right. So they said the main point is investments in the territory, which you just mentioned.
Again, as I said, I don't deal with these issues. Mm-hmm. If the person wants to make a recommendation with regard to how we deal with these things, it is something that we consider putting in the plan, but we can put it at the broader level with regard, as I said, with regard to doing business. Mm-hmm. And what are the policies that need to be clarified with regard to doing business in the territory, with regard to making investments in the territory, etc. So these things must be clearly defined so that they don't depend on whim and fancy. You understand? If we document these things, then that's as much as I can do. I can make that recommendation that these policies are properly documented, etc. But in the end, I am not involved in ensuring that these things happen at the policy level. I can make the recommendation. When it becomes a policy, when the government accepts it at the level of the House of Assembly, then the unit working with it can say, okay, let us look at these things. Let us review these things and see if we are putting hindrances in the way of investment when we are calling for investment. Mm-hmm. You know, so I think that it is a policy that we have to really look at, because I understand and I realize that people are not happy with the way it's going.
So there's a question, or someone made a comment and a question. I would like to share the presentation with the rest of our in-house Green Committee. Will a copy be made available to attendees?
We can make our presentation available to you. That's not a challenge. And we have already, the plan itself is on the government website. Here you can tell them how they can find it. And so it's an open document. And when we are finished with it, we want to be able to print it and ensure that everybody has a copy. We are trying also to do something called a citizen's guide to the National Sustainable Development Plan, because it's a very big document, 200 and something pages. So we want to do a simple guide so that people will be able to go through it more efficiently. The same as they do for the budget.
Okay. Are there any other questions by attendees? All right. I have one from a DeAndre Penn. One of the issues that was alluded to in the presentation was the lack of Virgin Islanders in management positions within the financial services sector. In fact, you can even make a case that the license process and fees or trust companies and the agents were specifically designed to keep locals out. For example, to have a Class 1 trust company license, do you need to have, I think, between 250,000 or 500,000 in committed capital? Additionally, vehicle a very conservative policy when it comes to our banking sector, which is why there are so few banks operating in the BVI. This operate to the disadvantage of all residents, particularly when it comes to service. This has also negatively affected our financial services sector.
Yes, I am not too sure that the reason given with regard to the banking sector is the correct one. Yes, there are very conservative policies, but in all of our territories, we have that same banking issue. About 3 years ago, that's okay, that's fine, DeAndre. A few years ago, I presented a paper on de-risking in the US, so the Federal Reserve, on de-risking. And the challenge, they say, for them is that our businesses are too small. So they don't make the kinds of profits. Of course, all the time they were making profit, we never got back anything. But now they find that our business is too small for them to do. And so they are creating a lot of barriers, and it is preventing us in the Caribbean. And look at the literature out there on de-risking when you get an opportunity. And the things that our heads of government have been saying, this is not a Virgin Islands problem only. It's a problem that all of us have. Now, with regard to the other issue, I think that one of the things that we did mention in the presentation was the need to align our educational needs with our business needs. The fact that you do not have people qualified in these sectors maybe is a challenge. Then we also have to change our attitude to our own people. We always think that people from the outside are much better placed to be able to give us advice than our people who are trained and who have gone overseas and who are giving advice in other places very competently and managing firms and doing all of these things. But we have a challenge because we know that Shea's mother was nurse, whoever it is, and we know she as a little boy growing up. So we don't think that she is the right person to run our business. You know, the closeness of the people to the and not looking at it objectively. I mean, one of the reasons I was very happy that I got the ability to come and do this consultation for this country is that I grew up here. I grew up here from the time I was 14, I was coming here. And every year, you know, I know this country very well, better than some of you all know it, you know, because you all are young and I'm an older person, you know, so I know this country very well. So I was very happy when I got the chance to come and have this input into the development to make sure that we understand our small, it is not just a small island developing state. It has certain peculiarities that an ordinary consultant would not be able to pick up on, these nuances. So I was very happy to be able to come and do that with you. The other thing I would like to suggest is that if one person may not have the ability to register as a trust company or to get a license as a trust company, what has happened to the issue of partnerships and amalgamation and things like that, and companies? A lot of us do not have the money, but this country has a tradition. Let me tell you, as a historian, I have done a lot of the history of this country. In the post-emancipation period, the people who were free did not have the money to buy the land from the planters. They got together. They got together as families, as groups, as communities to buy the land. That is why Virgin Islanders own the land, this land. Unlike many of our other countries, you own your land because you knew how to come together in partnerships, in cooperatives to form and to be able to build these things. I am recommending the same for you with regard to the financial services sector. get together, pull your resources, and be able to set up these trust companies to be able to have an input in your own development, but more than that, to also reap the benefits that people are not coming here to set up these companies because they're good and kind and so on. They are making profits, and you have the ability to do it also. So I'd like to make that recommendation with regard to capital accumulation and capital and how you invest. It is not only one person, it's not about you alone, because you might not be able to do it. But let us come together and do these things together. Of course, you have to set up trade-like guidelines and legal rules and parameters and so on. But I think it's the only way we can continue to own and develop our countries. I hope that satisfied the question.
I think it did. Well said. Someone commented. Any other questions by attendees? Please ask. Feel free.
And of course, Shay, feel free to jump in to respond also.
Yes, I think specifically exactly how you answered the last question. The ease of doing business report is definitely a point that I would have made as well. So I guess in regards to those questions, the growth in the financial sector, DeAndre made a very good point as well. And we definitely have to see how we can pool those resources. I agree with what you said, so I have nothing else to add. But we do want to know if anybody else has any questions. How can the financial services sector continue to grow? This is the time for some engagement, for feedback. What is the vision? That's why we're here to talk about as well. What would we like to see coming out of the financial services sector in the future? And this is, okay, so we do have a next question now. There we go. What do we want to see incorporated? The point of this plan is so that we can present the views of the people and the sector speaks for itself. So we have made some points to present, but we need to definitely hear it from the professionals and share your experience, because this plan is imbued with the views and desires and aspirations of the people that are working, living, and becoming part of this plan.
Mm-hmm. So I'll ask this question. CH, I can't see the full name, but they ask, what mechanisms are in place to ensure the success of this plan? We have not been successful in the past.
Well, I cannot guarantee success. But Che, you can start, and when you finish, I will add.
Correct. So what we do have is that we've learned from lessons of the past. And as Dr. Soomer said before, we're not here to make any guarantees. We're here to come to present the best plan that we can. And what we do have is lessons from the past. So this isn't the first time that the territory has attempted to create a national plan. We've also had support before, but there are certain things that are a bit different from before. The first attempt at a plan before, it was called the NIDS, which was a National Integrated Development Plan, and this was done 20 years ago by Arthur O'Neill, who presented a marvelous plan. And the plan was created. It was not implemented because it was a lot more of a prescription type of thing. There were not mechanisms for implementation. So what we do have already is the mechanisms for implementation. It was not tied to the budget in any way. And now we do have mechanisms for how such a plan can be executed and have it tied to the budget. And also what I will mention is that the global arena in terms of the discussion of sustainable development, there's a lot more support for it now. Since the creation of the plan, there was not even the Millennium Development Goals. We were already ahead of the game. There was no development goals, there was no global agenda, there was no regional agenda, there was no small islands agenda. So what we need to do is continue to tap in and keep ourselves aligned and learn from the lessons. So it's not just our one our one goal is continuous, but we do have a framework that we can continue to implement, and we do have an environment where we can continue to learn and keep pushing forward. We are not in this by ourselves. There are other territories and other countries going through the same thing, so we can learn our lessons, continue to tweak and learn and implement and continue to drive. So we do have a lot more lessons we can learn from.
Do you want to also say something, Shay, with regard to the budget and the way you have been ensuring that the Sustainable Development Goals are represented within the budget for the last couple of years?
Yes. So we have gone through the process of making sure that we've mapped these goals as far as the budget process to this plan. But what we realize is that when we talk about limitations, that the budget can only do so much. And this is where we do have to engage with private sector and the civil society on a whole. But we have identified what the budget can make an impact on, what government expenditure can make an impact on. And we have begun to align the goals, the quantitative and qualitative statistics that we can tie towards government expenditure. So we can say, hey, we're spending our money within this area. We can know what is going to develop in terms of a project, and we also know the impact that it can create, and also we show how these goals can then also be making an impact simultaneously connecting to the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's very good that we have mechanisms that we can compare how we are spending our money, and also have a way to view and measure the impacts that we're making as well. So we just have to continue to make these strides. It's not an easy process. It is going to be challenging, but we do have the mechanisms in place to continue to do that.
I would like to, let me just add to that. The National Sustainable Development Plan and the achievement of the goals are not only the responsibility of the government. She said it, but I want to reinforce it, that businesses, that citizens are also responsible for ensuring that these goals are achieved. And that is why one of the mandates of the policy unit will be to meet with these various sectors to get their inputs, to help them see where they are and what they need to do if there are any gaps with regard to helping to fulfill these goals. So that when a report goes from this country to the United Nations on the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals, it will be a report from the country. It will not just be a report from the government. So that everybody is responsible for ensuring that there is implementation. Yes, the government has to put in place the structures to make sure that there is engagement and coordination, but it is the responsibility of everybody to ensure that we have these goals fulfilled.
I'm taking Dr. Soomer, you were answering the question on the development planning unit.
I didn't see it.
Yes, the person had a follow-up on, we had a development planning unit in the past, which was dismantled, and we are we now reestablishing it? And is it a permanent unit now?
I will answer that.
Go ahead, Chi.
Yeah, so the development planning unit, it was the word dismantled. Is that the word that we said?
Yeah, well, they said dismantled.
Yes. Okay, so the development planning unit was it was a department under the Premier's office. It did split, but the functions have not gone away. So development planning unit was responsible for statistics as well as economic policies and development. And that is actually the split where I am now in the macro fiscal unit, which is under Ministry of Finance, which takes care of the planning functions, which is where I am. And then DPU then changed to the statistics office. So the functions are still here, And this unit that is being suggested, if you saw the presentation, that we're now looking at a National Sustainable Development Planning Unit, I wouldn't consider it to be the exact same thing, but it is something that we are proposing to be included. And Dr. Soomer, you can correct me or add if I missed anything there.
No, you didn't miss anything. Your first part was very well constructed. One of the important things for us when we were discussing it was the location of such a unit. Because the government and the premier will be responsible for the policy direction for the country, we have placed it in the office of the premier. For me, it is not only an issue of the financing, but it is an issue because I don't think that I want somebody involved in the fiscal planning, of the country to have to leave their job and go out and speak to stakeholders with regard to these things. So there must be coordination between the ministry. The ministry responsible for finance is very important to this policy unit. So there must be coordination, but I think that the policy direction must come from the leader of the country. And that is why I placed it there. Now, when I present it to the government, if they say, no, we want to put it in finance and can justify it, then I don't have a challenge with it. So the location to me will be a very important thing, but I think that the Minister of Finance, who is the premier, should be the one responsible for ensuring that the National Sustainable Development Plan, which transcends government, which transcends government departments, must be located in a place of authority. And I think that the office of the premier is the place for it.
So we have several other questions, but I want to ask this other question because it's a good follow-up to your answer, Dr. Soomer. The government is preoccupied with meeting the deadlines of the COI recommendations. How does this impact the timeline for the implementation of the National Sustainable Development Plan?
The two things are very separate. I'm working on deadlines that have been set by the office of the premier. I am not involved in any way in the COI. Granted constitutional advancement, constitutional review, the COI report, because I am not sure how the COI report is being reviewed and implemented. I am sure that there will be some kind of impact with regard to governance, but I am hoping that we are taking the opportunity to make things better. I know that there is a lot of concern around it. I'm not going to hide and tell you that there is no concern over the COI. I have concerns over it, as a person doing this work, and doing this work for more than a year before. In fact, the COI was launched almost the same time as we were, Che, and we proceeded with our work. And now that the report is out, a lot of the issues relate to the public service. But as I said, the National Sustainable Development Plan is supposed to transcend the public service. And I would hope that it would continue in that vein.
There are some other questions.
I can't predict the future.
None of us can at this point. Someone said, one of the big hindrances to implementation is funding. Plans are made and sit on shelves because of implementation, and funding is not outlined. How have you secured funding for the implementation?
Well, there are different ways that funding, we are right, we should look for funding, and resource mobilization is one of the things that the unit is supposed to do. You notice that it's one of the mandates of the unit. But apart from that, funding does not have to hinder the implementation of the plan. As she has said, there is funding within each ministry for certain sectors or sections of the plan. There are people like Che, for example, who can be seconded to that unit to make sure that the work is done within the unit. As I said, I am the consultant and my contract ends at the end of the year. So I will not be around intimately involved in this, you know, as I have been. At least I don't know that I will be. So we have to look at, and we're already looking at the resources that are available within the government to be able to do that. The budget is already involved in ensuring that there's funding for certain parts of the National Sustainable Development. In fact, every ministry of government is already involved in ensuring that their strategic plans align to the National Sustainable Development Plan. So it's not something that it's not something from the outside. We are not bringing and starting this thing from scratch. What we are doing is giving it an umbrella so that we can have that kind of discussion within that. But we do need money for coordination that it perhaps will not be in the budget that we'll have to look for. Money for feedback to the public, you know, money with regard to preparing reports, etc. So that kind of funding we may have to put in again. But as I said, there's a plan for trying to mobilize resources.
I will also add to that question that it's good to have a plan in order to discuss funding. Making a plan and a plan for funding might not always be the best ideal. It might not always be ideal. And throughout our consultations, we always said that money is not the problem, because money is available. It's how you use the money and making sure that we address the issues. What we'll also find is that there's also opportunity for international investment and also, you know, like green financing. There are other avenues for attracting funding to the BVI and to the Virgin Islands, but they will always ask, where is the plan and what plans are we using? Where is the money going to go? And these are the conversations that we need to have. We need to understand how would we utilize funding, and where would the money be directed, and what are the channels for distribution in order to have those questions. The next thing is that this is our 15-year plan, and we've also seen how quickly a landscape can change. So what we do know is that we do understand the impacts that we want to make. We do understand that the areas where we would like to see a difference. And our challenge now is to discuss the how. So in some areas, we are not here to tell you how it's going to be done. We are here to discuss a plan and saying, what do we want to see happen for the BVI and what impacts would we like to see? And then we can have the conversation of how would it be done in partnership with the private sector, with civil society, with government, and everyone working together, especially with the environment and taking these things into consideration. So how is it going to be done is for us to figure out together, and not just for 3 people or, you know, 1 unit who is writing a plan. Like we say, we are not here to tell the future. So we are here to have partnership, to have these discussions and discuss these questions together.
Che, I wanted to interrupt a little bit. Daniel Davis would like to see us more than being a glorified post box. He asked if the panel is familiar with the McKinsey report, and there's someone else questioned that as well. What happened to the implementation unit that was set up to implement the recommendations of the McKinsey report? Was that report taken into consideration in developing the NSDP?
I am familiar with the McKinsey report, and I do know that there was some attempts to address some of the recommendations. I know previously, specifically to labor, there was the attempt to make the labor department more efficient and improvement. So I know that initiatives previously were done specifically for the McKinsey report. as of recently, we know that there are lessons that we have taken from it. I can't say that we directly looked at the Mckinsey report from where I sit, but we do know that there are shared views that still would be existing. Maybe we can take a look back at that. So it's good that that was also mentioned. Dr. Soomer?
Yes, I certainly agree with you. We have looked at it and we have taken some things from it, but we can go back and look at it again if you're not satisfied with what we have in the report, that it was reflected in the report in the National Sustainable Development Plan.
Okay. What's the panel's view on improving economic cooperation with the USVI and Puerto Rico, given how linked our economies continue to be? And how can we improve economic and political cooperation with Puerto Rico and the USVI?
You all are asking a lot of political questions that I cannot, well, it's not that I cannot understand, but I cannot respond to. But I think that a national sustainable development plan can speak to partnerships, which we have done, and that is one of the sustainable development goals. Partnerships, alliances, and so on. And we have always had a partnership with the US Virgin Islands. We have always had that partnership. I remember growing up here as a youngster and being able to go to St. Thomas and St. Croix without a visa. So we have always had these partnerships that are outside of the bigger picture, like the United States, et cetera, et cetera. And I would encourage us to continue to have these partnerships. A lot of people in the from Tortola, from Virgin Gorda, etc., went to the US Virgin Islands to work, and we have families. It is a family issue right now. It is not just a different country issue. We have these connections. And so I would encourage that we continue to build these connections and not let colonial territorial boundaries define our relationships with our family. And I don't know if I am moving into political issues, but I prefer to leave them at the level of the social issues that are very important. People marry across the channel, you know, and we have these engagements, we have these investments. Tortolans have invested in St. Thomas. People from St. Thomas who have family here have invested and so on. And I can see no harm really in continuing to have these kinds of relationships.
Well, I'll jump in there as well. When we look at partnerships, especially with other countries, we basically want to look at three main things. We can look at the movement of money, we can look at the movement of people, and the movement of goods and services. And I will definitely start with the issue of trade. And we know that we are already highly dependent on these territories, Puerto Rico, St. Thomas, and the US, just for the amount of goods that we import. So when we look at that, I think I would propose another question to look at how can we discuss, you know, certain partnerships in terms of how do we want to, if we were to decrease our dependency, our own, what we call self-sustainability in food security, we know that we are going to decrease our dependence on these partnerships of these countries. So what kind of a partnership do we want to see with Puerto Rico and St. Thomas, knowing that these countries are also US, they're under, you know, it's entirely different. What would we, then we're getting political, right, Dr. Soomer? So we don't want to go there, but we do want to discuss the issue of food security, so that we don't rely so much on the trade relations, and then we can discuss what would continued partnership with these countries look like. We already know that we have banks that are already here. We have banks from St. Thomas, banks from Puerto Rico, and we also need to think about how do we want to develop our own financial institutions as well. So as we continue to grow, we also decrease our dependence and then we can still have a discussion of what kind of partnerships do we continue to see going and coming out of these situations. And then I'll also ask what other partnerships do we see ourselves having, whether regionally and internationally.
Well, there
Let
was
me
someone
add
that
something
came
that
in before you add, Dr. Soomer. They were asking on how much was the population growth rate projections factored into the plans, and I mean you can also add that into the response from Shade.
Okay. I want to point out also something she said about the trade. It used to be the reverse. The Virgin Islands, the British Virgin Islands fed the US Virgin Islands. We grew enough food to export. And when we look at food security, especially in the post-COVID-19 period, we have to see what we can do with regard to our agriculture. We had a very good meeting with the farmers, and how they see food security and the things that they need, the investment that they need in agriculture for them to be able, and water and things like that, for them to be able to come back to that position where they are major exporters instead of importers of food. And it's one of the things that we have to look at, because they produce a lot of non-GMO food without fertilizers that people are looking for healthy living. How do we connect these things? We have to make the connections. And what was the second part? Sorry, I got caught up. You were saying something. You just said something.
Yes, I was mentioning on the projected growth rate of the population. If it was factored in.
We looked at the growth rate, and we have not had significant growth in the country, especially since the hurricane. What we saw instead was a lot of people leaving the country, but this is the opportunity for us to recognize that location is not the only thing that you look at when you look at population, because we have a very big and active and well-placed diaspora that can help with the development of the country. And one of the things the policy unit will be charged with is ensuring that there is engagement with the diaspora. In a short while, we got a number of young men who are doctors in very big hospitals in the US and in England, who are willing to give up their services and free to the country if we just facilitated it. How do we then facilitate the involvement of the offshore population of the country? And that is as important as the number of people who are living here. So it's one of the dimensions that we looked at. We looked at the population and we looked at population growth. If you look at the situation analysis within the National Sustainable Development Plan, you'll see a whole section on population. So it's there within the plan.
I have one more question. I think, okay, so these are going to be our last two questions, and then we'll wrap up this session. What mechanisms are built into the plan to make adjustments and to facilitate public input as necessary when there are change of circumstances in the future?
Well, we do have a feedback mechanism built into the implementation plan, and we have to refine it to say exactly how it's going to happen. But we expect that at least every 6 months, there will be an update given to the public with regard to the progress on the National Sustainable Development Plan. That will be led by the unit, but supported by the Premier and the officials, the government officials within the unit. So we want to ensure that there's feedback, that people can also send in their comments. And it's very difficult to get people to send in comments. You know how long we have had the plan out there, and we have asked people to send in comments, tell us how we can improve, and and look at things specifically. So unless we went to a sector like we are going to ask you the same question, tell us whether or not you think that the things we have recommended in the plan are the things you want to see and they relate directly to you. If not, give us some more specifics. because there are some general things, but we also want specifics related to your industry. It is very hard for people to respond. People prefer to say to me, we have a plan and we don't know if it's going to be implemented. And so, but tell me what you want to see in the plan, just in case I am successful with ensuring there's implementation, so that your ideas will be in it. We have written the plan from the perspective of the consultations that we have had. We have looked at the documents that we have had in the past, like the report the young man mentioned, the Blue Economy one, the Physical Development one. We have looked at a number of different plans that we have incorporated. We have looked at the budget procedures, etc. So we have looked at a number of different things that have informed the development of the National Sustainable Development Plan. But we also want sector specifics that we may not have captured for us to improve on it. So that's what we want from you.
And what I will add there is within the presentation, we also talked about feedback and dialogue. And this is also very important. Dr. Soomer mentioned, us not being citizens once every 4 years. So we know that we have to continue this dialogue in terms of continuing the partnership. Partnerships is key. There are 17 goals, and the last goal is partnerships. And it takes people working together to get things done. So we do have to have that plan to continue to stay engaged with the public and stay engaged with the people, but we have to build that culture where people feel comfortable talking, sharing the views, and bringing constructive feedback. I think that my opinion personally is that people remain silent for so long that before we can get any constructive feedback, we have to listen to the verbal diarrhea. We have to just let people vent. People just need to vent. People don't get to talk. They need to vent before we can even get to good discussions and constructive feedback. And that's because it's not something that we have continued to practice. So this is why we are engaging with the sector. So, we thank everyone for coming and just sharing the views. And this is something that we have to normalize in our conversation, and not just wait on when we have access to the politicians, but we have continued dialogue. And I think since the pandemic that we are seeing more of this, we're seeing people having more forums, more discussions. So this is something that we do have to continue and document and continue to present our views.
I agree. The final question, given the emphasis on data and statistics, how will the Central Statistics Office be supported so that they can produce statistics on a more timely basis? And have we even started the census, and what's the status?
Should I answer that question, because we have had 4 or 5 meetings with them already?
Yes. So and I've worked in that department, so I smile when I see it. So the first thing I will say is that we do have to continue to advocate for Central Statistics Office to be properly resourced. Data is a very huge thing. We need to be able to make informed decisions, and we need to improve this all across government. We do have the goals and indicators and understanding the statistics. So the statistical infrastructure is there, but we do need to have the improvements on it. Central Statistics Office, it's something that, people don't want to do statistics anymore. People think numbers are boring, but somebody has to do it. And then we also have to understand that data is everybody's business. It's not just the business of the Central Statistics Office, because if the people are not collecting their own data, then it makes it difficult for the office to do what it has to do. And also, my last point is that we have to build a culture of keeping our statistics. That is something that people don't normally do. So this is also part of it. The census, I'm not sure exactly what is the status of it. We know that the territory has changed so much since OMA, the landscape. So the plan that we had, the plan that we would have had for doing the census has now changed. Houses are now gone. So they've had to probably gone through a process of remapping, retooling, understanding the landscape. Now houses are not the same. There was a household survey that was executed before, and the map that was given before was, there were challenges. People don't live in the same houses anymore. OMA was 5 years ago, and we have still not gone back to where we were before OMA. So I do understand what you're saying. OMA was 5 years ago, but we're saying understand the landscape has changed, and we have to, they have been working on it, and I'm not in a position to say exactly where the census is, but I know that the strategy for going about the census is not exactly the same. That was my point. So yeah, so we do look forward to hearing about the census. This is a very small territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and we have to upgrade the way in which we collect data.
Correct.
It means that people have to also realize that they have to be involved in the collection of data. So if we decide we're going more digital with the census, people will still have to be able to go somewhere to input information. The challenge with a census in all of our countries is that people don't want to give you their information.
That's right.
People do not want to give you their information. Why should I tell you how many children I have and their ages and, and all things that you should know for a census? So it is a challenge. It is not just a challenge on the part of the government in making sure that its system of data collection is more efficient. It is also when you approach the people for the data, the kind of reactions that you get with regard to collection of data. So I'm saying that to say, yes, no excuses with regard to data collection. You need the data for you to be able to make good policies. But people have to realize that it is their responsibility also.
I think that's a good note to wrap up on, Dr. Soomer, because I think we're going to go back and forth about the census because, everybody wants one now. But any final words as we close out today? And then if you can also input for persons who didn't get a chance to ask questions today, an email address where they can probably write in formally their views.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful engagement. It's good to get back to speaking to people on the National Sustainable Development Plan. We had a little hiatus because of what was happening in the country, but it's good that we are able to get back to you. We want your input. We certainly want your input. As I said, we have tried to look at the financial services in a lot of detail, and we have tried to ensure that your face is well within the National Sustainable Development Plan. But we also need you to tell us if you see there any things that we left out, any gaps. We want to be as comprehensive as possible, but we also want to be as focused as possible within the plan. So please, she has put in the email address in the chat. Feel free to send us your comments. I know that there are bigger issues that people have, not just about the plan, but what is happening generally in the territory, and that you need people to speak to you, But we were very happy to share with you on the plan specifically. And if any of your businesses or your sectors need us to come in to look at how you can align what you're doing more with regard to the Sustainable Development Goals and the report that we would be able to present to the UN, so that we can, we can add all of these things again, and we can see this section is from the financial services in the plan. Then we will be able to have a much better representation with regard to what is happening in the country towards fulfilling the goals that have been set. So thank you very much for your input, and I really enjoyed the session.
Yes, so hi, thank you. Any final words, Jay?
I would just like to thank everyone for showing up and engaging. The conversation has been really good, and seeing the numbers increase just from the beginning we appreciate the support for everyone that showed up, that took the time to listen to what we had to share, and continue to understand that this is a process for all of us. And you know, if you have heard about the plan, then you should talk about it. Tell somebody else about the plan, because we're trying to reach as many people as possible. If you see it, please read it, please pay attention, please talk about it. Some people say that, oh, I've never seen anything like this before. And then you talk about it, say, oh, I've seen that somewhere, but I wasn't paying attention. So it's important understanding that media can take people's attention. And this is a conversation that we all need to continue to have, that we all need to commit to, so that we know that we have this dialogue and it's not something political. It's not just about immediate favors and benefit, but for the good of the territory, for the future of everyone. And that's going to be my closing thoughts.
Thank you,
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I'm going to read out the email address Che provided, nationalplanbvi@gov.bg. So attendees, you can share that amongst your peers. It's again, nationalplanbvi, no space, @gov.bg. Please feel free to write in any more of your views or opinions or input towards the plan. I'm pretty sure we at BVI Finance will make that plan again available to members and the industry. So persons won't tell you they haven't seen it before, and they'll also get an opportunity to review it one more time to share any input or add to it. Again, I'd like to thank you both for the presentation on the Building a Sustainable Virgin Islands National Sustainable Development Plan. I've been your host for today, Adriana Salvaral, and thank you all for joining us at BVI Finance Breakfast Forum. Until we have a next one, thank you all, and be sure to let us know any of your comments and reviews on how we can improve and better serve the industry. Thank you all and have a good day.
Thank you. You also.
Thank you, Adriana, and everyone.